Welcome to the Legacy Driven Marriages Podcast, episode number 44. I'm Walt McKinley, and I'm here with my beautiful wife and my partner in crime, as always, Stephanie.
Hey, everybody.
Man, today we are going to talk about how to create or maybe even elevate your emotional intimacy in your relationship. And look, guys, stick around because we're going to cover a lot on this one, especially as it relates to emotional intimacy, how you can personally improve it in your marriage, what to look out for, and frankly, what even is it to start with? The more we focus on creating emotional intimacy, the more powerful and the ability to withstand the storm our relationships become. And the best part is this is a 1 in 3 part series that we're doing on intimacy, period. So you've got your emotional intimacy, you've got your physical intimacy, and you've got your spiritual intimacy. So before we get started, take a second, make sure you hit that subscribe button up front because you do not want to miss any of the next 3 weeks. This is going to be some real gold for your relationship. So I can't wait to dive into this. And by the way, guys, emotional intimacy matters for us too. I'm just going to say that up front because everybody's probably thinking it's for the ladies.
I'm glad you said that.
And let me tell you, the more emotionally intimate we are, the more physically intimate we become in our relationship. So if that ain't a win-win, I don't know what is. So I can't wait to dive into this one today.
Yeah. This is one of, outside of expectations, this is probably my other favorite topic to talk about in relationships. Because to me, those two are the two big pieces of a relationship that often go overlooked. And it's not even realized that that's what it is that holds you together. And it is the thing that tends to slowly erode and lead to the demise of relationships. So I think this is another one. You guys take notes on this, really take this in, really. And we emphasize this on almost every episode. Please listen to this with your partner. And if you can't listen to it with them, at least get them to listen to it. So you've both listened to it and you both can talk about it, because this is going to be one of those things that if you can get this right, then you stand a very good chance of having a really, really deep relationship. Like one that lasts the test of time.
Yeah, and you think about all the different things that pull us apart from each other. Just the business in general of life. Relationships are hard. We got kids, we got jobs, we have social media taking our attention. We have frustrations, we have stress, we have insecurities, we struggle with confidence. I mean, there's so many things in life that will just pull us apart as couples, and maintaining a high level of emotional intimacy truly is the thing that carries you through the storms in your relationship. Because let's be real, if you're together long enough, you're going to have some storms that you got to work through.
Oh, yes. And, he just mentioned that this is going to be 3 parts. And so obviously you kind of really, if you can get all 3, that's obviously where the real magic happens. But it starts with this one, and this is the foundation piece. So if you don't connect in the emotional level, it's very hard to connect in the other 2 areas in the same way without this. So I think, women, it's funny because he said, men listen to this one too, because we all tend to think even I, it tends to be the women that really like the emotional part. And next week will be when the men are yeah, you need to listen to that one because, they like the physical part. And so we tend to kind of go back and forth with that one. And so obviously this is going to be my favorite. Next week's going to be Walt's favorite.
I'm going to put a plug in for all the fellas next week, or you high sex drive people anyway.
But seriously, everybody has to do both. And like he said, if you can really get to this one, if men, I'm going to key in on the men. If you can get this piece, then what we talk about next week will be that much better, because this is generally where the magic happens for the woman. So women need this one to really connect with you on the next one. So meaning the physical part.
And what's wild is I want you guys to really think about this. The times in your life when you've been able to be truly authentic and vulnerable in whatever situation it was. Think about the internal freedom that you really had in that moment when you can just be yourself and that's all that you need to be. I will tell you, when you can be authentic and you can be vulnerable, there is an internal freedom that allows you to operate at your best. And when you're operating at your best, you're that great human for the other people that are around you that need that best version of you, and you help them become the best version of them. And we're going to talk about ways that you need to not only do that for yourself, but then how do you end up showing up for your spouse that really will catapult your relationship and take it to another level, especially with all these things meant to really tear us apart and create a divide in our society right now that makes it hard. And that's not even counting this stuff just as human beings that we have different experiences, right? Different triggers, different traumas, different ways that we saw our parents live or not live, different ways that we saw people on TV or not live when we're growing up. I mean, all of these experiences create the expectation of what we want in our relationships. And if you didn't listen to it, go back to episode 43, listen to expectations, because it is profound. And we're getting some amazing feedback on that, even though it was Thanksgiving week when we put it out. And so this emotional intimacy will build a connection that will allow you to really live in that vulnerable and truly authentic state so that you can maximize your own potential within the scope of your relationship too.
Yeah, I had to say, Walt and I think this is one thing that we got really right in our relationship for a long, like,
Well,
we did.
we didn't get it right at first.
I was going to say, we started off really strong, and then we made the mistakes of letting this erode and not being intentional about keeping up with it. And we've quickly realized that it does take intention and life gets in the way. And if you don't, you'll find out you start losing touch with your partner and it leads to the demise. So, and then since then, we've learned to really key in on this piece and really get to know each other deeper than we ever have before.
Mm-hmm.
And we realized the more vulnerable we got with each other and the more that we were honest with each other, the deeper this connection was and has transformed our relationship into the best it's ever been.
Yeah, so you're either going to learn the hard way, like we had to through our own experiences and misses in our relationship, or you can learn from our experiences and not go down that same rabbit hole where, I'll never forget, and I'm pretty sure I mentioned this on another podcast or two that we've done. There was a moment when Stephanie and I were in that really rough season of our relationship around 12 years. I mean, the kids were little, had work. I mean, we had just really drifted apart. And neither of us were willing to be vulnerable with each other to kind of bring that full circle and get out of that crazy and insane cycle that we were living in. And we went to dinner one night. Her parents came to town. We went to dinner one night and she just looked beautiful. She looked very pretty. And because I had so much resentment build up and because I wasn't able to really be vulnerable in that moment because of my own anger and ego and everything else that came along with it, I remember wanting to tell her, and it almost felt awkward or weird to tell my wife she looked beautiful in the moment. Then I had guilt and shame later on to myself when everybody's quiet. I had some guilt and shame that was just I was hanging on to in that moment because I couldn't even tell my wife that because there was so much resentment that was built up. And that's what happens when life hits you and it hits you hard and you're struggling in your relationship and you don't know how the hell you're going to get out of it and you really disconnect as a couple and that emotional intimacy isn't there. I mean, it's real and it's raw and it hurts. And it is a life lesson that we don't want you guys to have to learn the hard way. That is for sure. Go ahead. Why? I thought you were going to tell the lie and the truth.
I thought that was going to do that.
All right, we'll do it at the end.
Sorry.
Obviously, we coordinated on the whole thing except for this one little part right.
Walt was heading one direction and I was heading another. Sorry. I actually wanted to say real quick that I'm very proud of Walt because he has actually, for a man, been so vulnerable to share a lot of things with me that I know were very hard to share. And that's the stuff that's why I'm always keying in on the men about the vulnerability piece, because I just can't stress enough how much that means to the woman in your life. And I know that you get conditioned and everyone else teaches you to keep that stuff to yourself and keep it locked away and don't share it. And that's a weakness, and that allows people to hurt you. And that's the message you get from the world all the time. But you can't have that deep level in a relationship with someone and they will never fully know you if you can't open up about those things to your special person. And that's what the beauty in marriage is this person that you chose as your partner in life is the most important person in your life. They are the only one who's going to have the level of intimacy with you in life. Like, there is no one else you will have these 3 levels of intimacy. You won't have emotional, physical, and spiritual with anyone else but your life partner. And so it's the deepest connection you can have in your life. And I think we don't treat it that way. And that's why we're doing this podcast, is to teach people that it does take this level of effort and this level of intention and this level of vulnerability to have this kind of true intimacy with someone. It's the only person you will ever have that level of intimacy with. And so if you can't open up about the deep emotional stuff with this person that you chose to be your life partner, then it's going to be really lonely. I mean, this is the one person you should be able to really fully know you like no one else. And that's kind of what we're getting to with the emotional intimacy stuff, is that it's that to have true intimacy is fully knowing someone. And the only other person who fully knows you is God. So that's how special this relationship is. And that's kind of what I'm hoping you take away from this. When we do this whole 3-part series and you get to the end of the 3-part series, you're going to see no one else gets to have this deep of a relationship with you than your spouse.
Yeah, and I love that you said that, because it is truly the oneness with somebody else. And there's a real level of trust that needs to be there. So if you find yourself in a season maybe where there's been some trust broken, or there's some anger, or there's some disappointment, or there's this feeling, I don't even know who I'm married to anymore. They're a totally different person. Don't give up hope. What I will tell you is the struggle Stephanie and I went through, and the fact that we committed to making our marriage work and we worked on each other, ourselves, and being a better spouse for each other, it brought us closer than we ever could have been in an emotionally intimate way than if we didn't go through the struggle. So the struggle will make you a stronger couple if both of you are willing to get into the arena and fight for it. And so we've talked a lot about emotional intimacy, and Steph, you alluded to this a little bit. Emotional intimacy really is to fully know and be fully known by your partner in a relationship. And we talked about this. This is important for men and women. I think women naturally will gravitate towards the emotional intimacy just because of the way that we're all raised and cultural norms. But I know that a lot of men suffer in silence because they feel disconnected. And that's when they go out and they find what's missing in their relationship, and they become emotionally and physically intimate with somebody else. And women do the same thing. So the opportunity to have that one special relationship, the one you committed to for better or for worse, and really be fully known and know your partner fully, will be the thing that helps you create an extraordinary life where you don't live in this lonely, dark place, even if you're actually married to somebody.
Yeah, so mostly I just wanted to get this point one for us was, what is emotional intimacy? And that's it. It's fully knowing someone or being fully known by someone. And it's that I feel like this is the one person that you should have that connection with. It doesn't mean that you can't emotionally connect to other people. You will,
Mhm.
but not in the same way that this person's going to know you. And like I said, I think the only other person who would know you that closely is God. So that's why, like, God made marriage so important, because that was what he was saying, is that we're supposed to become one. And this is the only person he's putting in your life that gets that connection. So that's how much we should be valuing what marriage is. And like he said, where this falls apart is if you start feeling like you're disconnected from your spouse and you don't nurture that intimacy with them, you're going to start finding it somewhere else and sharing it with someone else. And we all know where that goes. So,
Yeah, and I think your ability to share not only your deepest, darkest secrets with somebody else, and there's a whole freedom piece that comes with speaking your truth that you'll miss out on if you don't do it. But it's also your hopes and your dreams. It's the ability to affirm and care when they're telling you their deepest, darkest secrets and they're telling you their hopes and dreams. And it's really creating a bond through that interaction that you have with each other that, like Stephanie said, you might create emotional bond with other people through different ways, like with your buddies, right? There's a different camaraderie that men have with other men. There's You might have a female friend, or ladies too. There's a different camaraderie you have with ladies. There's a different camaraderie that you have with other couples. But the way that you should share, the way that you should trust, the level of detail and the story that you might not tell nobody else in your whole life. The only other person that knows that part of who you are is God. But when you can share that with another human being in this rat race of life that we're living in, and you can create that space for each other in a way that allows both people to share, because I know they're going to be supported and affirmed and loved and not judged, you will really create something that is a lasting legacy for your family from today moving forward forever. And we know, because we're literally doing that now through the hard times and the mistakes we made years ago.
well, I'm saying, like, we're parents also. So, as a parent, and even being a child of a parent, um, you would think that's the other relationship that would probably know you better than anybody else. But as you become an adult, you move further and further away from your parent. And even with it's your best friend, even if your best friend, you think your best friend knows everything about you, they're still not going to know you like your spouse. Your spouse lives with you every day, in the day in and day out. They see every side of you. And they're the only person that you're going to have the physical intimacy with also, that you wouldn't have with your best friend. At least I hope not. So I hope you see, like, that's why it's going to really make sense when you see all the parts of the intimacy together. But I hope you guys see that this is why this relationship is the one that is most important, because you can have a true intimacy with this person like no one else.
So I think, so point one is, we've talked about what is emotional intimacy at this point. I want you to ask yourself a question. Maybe ask this of your spouse too, and then you guys can discuss it together. Is it more difficult for you to fully know your spouse, or to be fully known by your spouse? What's shocking to me is that people's hopes and dreams is sometimes the hardest thing that they can share with their spouse, because they're worried about what happens if I don't attain these things. What happens if I don't go chase these things? What happens if these things don't materialize, if I do go and chase them? And they get so worried about that. But there's some chemistry that happens when you can hope and dream together about the future that will bring you so closer to me than the skeletons in your closet that maybe you haven't ever told anybody about, or those deep, dark secrets you maybe haven't even told anybody about. So ask yourself that question. Is it more difficult for you to fully know your spouse, or to be fully known by your spouse?
I think this question is kind of asking, is one of you more vulnerable than the other? Because it can be hard to, when we say fully know your spouse, is it hard for you to fully know your spouse because they don't open up about things? They have a hard time sharing that and they're not really vulnerable. Or is it harder for you to share those things? Like you're holding things back and hiding things because it's hard for you to share. Which one is more difficult for you and why? That's what we want you to think about after this podcast and talk about with your spouse. Which one is it for both of you? Because maybe that will reveal something for you to realize, like, hey, one of us isn't really opening up truly with each other, or maybe both of you. And maybe both of you are good at it. So maybe this one's not an issue for you. But this is the kind of stuff we got to start digging in and asking ourselves, because I know for Walt, we were kind of surprised at our answer to this for each other.
Yeah.
And we had different reasons for why we said what we said. And so this can be really eye-opening. And I'm going to move on to point 2, which is, how can you improve or elevate your emotional intimacy? How do we make that happen? And for us, we feel like this is where you create this or improve it by creating that safe space for your spouse to feel like they can share those things with you. I have to be honest, this was big. We just did a marriage workshop. We do one every Monday night with a group, and there was a couple that discovered something with this. Actually, both couples, 2 couples in there, discovered some big things with this that they didn't even realize was something holding back their marriage. And, one of them, it was a previous relationship where, they were divorced and now are remarried. And so this couple that's remarried is joined the group. And they're in the group because they feel like they want to do better this time around. They don't want to make the same mistakes they made in the past. And they, it kind of came to light that he felt like in his previous relationship, he was vulnerable. And then she took and used that against him as like a weapon.
And that happens a lot in relationships, man.
Yes.
On both sides of the coin.
And so, but it's very helpful to have uncovered that, because now his wife can realize like why he's holding back, and she can do more to create that safe space for him and let him know that it will be different with her, and that she's not going to use this against him, that she wants to use it to fully know him and be able to show up as a better spouse for him, because she will know why he feels the way he feels. And this is what I'm like, I get so passionate about this piece, because this is the thing that's like, man, if everybody would do this, how much stronger our relationships would be.
Well, what was really cool when we saw them do that was there was that honesty. You could see almost the freedom being unlocked in him in the moment. And the honesty really did create a freedom that he had missed. But like Stephanie,
I think his wife was over there like, yes, now I know. Now I know
right,
what I'm dealing with here.
what was cool is she was thinking, so that makes so much sense now. Now I can maybe adjust how I feel about you struggling to open up a little bit and not take it so personal, because it was really not even about me. It was about a past experience that you're working through right now. So it's so cool. As we were facilitating that group, we were asking these questions.
Were going off.
And it's like this light bulb spinning in this amazing circle of love between the two of them. And I think everybody had an epiphany in these moments, and realizing that the most vulnerable parts of your story are the thing that's going to create that freedom. But you also have to ask yourself, why am I struggling to share the most vulnerable parts of my story? What is it about that part of my story that I'm struggling to open up to my spouse with about? It's typically a lived experience from a previous relationship, or maybe when you were a kid. And so it's like a 2-for-1 special when you really work on those things, because not only do you unlock some internal freedom for you, you unlock some freedom in your relationship. And it's so beautiful when that happens. And we've done that over and over and over and over and over again. in our 24-year marriage and 26 years of being together. And the more you do it, you guys, man, I'm telling you, bro, the more you do it, the more you realize the freedom it gives you and the love and the emotional intimacy and the connection that it gives you. And then you start leaning in on it. Then you believe that the output of you giving that vulnerability in the moment is something that is going to create more connection and is truly special. And when you can lean in that way, man, it's I can't tell you, I can't even explain it until you do it. It's astronomical change to your relationship.
Yeah, and that honesty creates freedom for you. When you're honest about your feelings and how you're really feeling about something or something holding you back, it's so freeing. It's like, when you're holding it in and you're holding that deep inside, it's like a weight that's just sitting on you and drowning you. And when you let that go and you open that up and you share that, it lifts that off of you and you just feel so much freer. And that shows up in your relationship.
Big time.
Yeah. And like we were just saying, and then when you're honest with that stuff, it allows your spouse to show up for you in a way that they can't if they don't know. Oh, this is the thing that I'm just like, I'm so hoping that everyone takes away this piece of the emotional intimacy and that vulnerability and the honesty and how important this is to your relationship, how different you both show up when you do this. When you can be vulnerable and let them into those deep, dark places that you keep hidden, or for me, even, when we talked about this, he kind of started talking about it a little bit. He kind of jumped ahead, but um, for some of us, it's hard to share our failures. For some of us, it's hard to share sins that we've done. For some of us, for me, it's hard to share my hopes and dreams and desires because I have a fear of that failing or not making it happen. And so it's usually one of those three things. Like it's a fear of one of those. It's fear of failure. It's a fear of rejection. It's one of those fears that's playing on you and is the reason that you hold back and don't share these things. For the friend we were talking about in our group, it was a fear of rejection. He was afraid to share that because he's afraid of getting rejected again. For me, it's a fear of failure. I'm afraid to really share what I really dream because I'm afraid it won't happen and I'll be let down in the disappointment, and it's a fear of failure. So this is the kind of stuff you got to dig in for yourself and your spouse, because you need to find for yourself. Like if you answered that question earlier, which one was harder for you, the fully knowing your spouse or being fully known by your spouse? You need to dig deep on why that is. And it's one of these reasons. It's some fear you're holding on to. And so is it a fear of rejection? Is it a fear of failure? What is it that holds you back from being fully honest, transparent, and vulnerable with your spouse? Because it is affecting your relationship, whether you want to admit it or not. It really is.
And I think you got to remind yourself, man, fear is a freaking liar.
Mm-hmm.
Fear is a liar. And imagine living your life in so much fear that you don't ever even get close to reaching your potential because you don't even have the courage to feel the disappointment or rejection, learn the lesson, and continue as a better version of you. Or what if you embraced the fear of the unknown? You leaned all the way in, ask yourself the what if question we ask ourselves every single time we do something, and think of all the amazing results that can happen, and you chased those amazing results of what you know can happen when you run through fear. Imagine how different your life could be if that was your mentality for everything, especially your relationship. It will transform who you are as a human being.
We missed one last thing about this. The humility piece is you also have to be willing to admit where you fall short in things, or your area, Walt likes to call it areas of opportunity. Where can you be better? There are things that we all fall short on.
Yep.
And you have to be open to your blind spots. Oh, and we had such a good service at church last week on blind spots and how
Mm.
we all have them. There's areas where someone is trying to tell you there's an area that's bothering them about you, but it's hard for us to acknowledge or admit that we do it. Um, that and those areas, those blind spots that we have, they need care and correction. We need to work on being better at those things because it is obviously affecting our relationship if the person's telling us there's something that we do that really bothers them and we don't own up to it, then we hurt our relationship.
Hmm.
Um, Personally, I've talked about how time management for me is an issue. I'm really bad about running late, and that's the thing that drives him crazy, and it's the thing I need to work on. That's one of my blind spots. Um, like I said, we all have them. For Walt, it's his tone sometimes with me and the girls because he's a man and we're women and we're just more delicate, and so we take things a little more harsh than they can really relate to or understand, but like that's a blind spot for him. And so I'm just sharing that so that you guys have an example of what I mean by the blind spots because we all have them.
Yeah, and I think stop saying the word failure. I hate that word. Start saying opportunity. A failure is an opportunity to learn a lesson that's going to make you better. And if you rethink how you feel about that and you train your mind to think about it differently, you won't be afraid of the failure. You'll be more afraid to not learn the opportunity that's going to make you a better version of you. It's huge and a massive difference in how you think about life. And by the way, how you approach life once that's your mentality and it's embedded in who you are as a human.
So the question we're going to leave you on that point too. So we talked about how to improve or elevate your emotional intimacy. Now the question we want you to ask yourselves, is it harder for you to share personal failures, your hopes and dreams, or being open to blind spots? And what could you and your spouse do better to create a safe environment for you to share those things? This is this is a big one because, like I said, this is generally the thing that's keeping us from having that true intimacy with our partner. So it's really important to get to the bottom of this one and why you know
Mhm.
why you don't feel safe with telling your spouse, and that's something you need to communicate to your spouse. If there is something you're holding back and there's a reason why you can't share it with them, you need to tell them.
Mm.
And the best way that you know how, just start by sharing something. And if that doesn't get a good reaction, come back to it and just keep repeating it at different times so that they start to understand that this really is a thing for you. Like they're not going to know unless you're communicating that. And sometimes they don't receive it well. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that they won't. It just means they didn't in that moment. So revisit it at another time. And I got to tell you, I know some things I just had written down here, some things I did that I felt like created a safe space. And that was reaffirming your commitment to them, like basically telling them, I'm not going anywhere and I'm here no matter what. Um, Being vulnerable yourself, if you open up to them, they're going to be a lot more willing to open up to you. And truly listen when they share something. And that means like you really being quiet and absorbing what they're saying and being able to say it back to them so that they know you understood. Um, and different ways to show that you care. Um, you
Really
know,
just validating sometimes, understanding, even if you don't totally agree with their emotion in the moment, just understanding their perspective is huge on just showing somebody that you care, to me
right.
anyway. And I think I'm going to add one more thing to that, Steph, because I think all these points, when you ask yourselves these questions, or maybe you're going to talk to your spouse about a hurt that they caused you still got to come to them with a solution focused approach. It's not a
Mhm.
blame game about what they did to you or didn't do to you or didn't do for you. It's about saying, hey, how can we make our relationship better? How can we create a more powerful union between the two of us and become more emotionally intimate? And if you come to the conversation solution focused without blaming, you're going to have a really great outcome from that conversation 9 times out of 10. You're at least going to plant a positive seed about what you need from your spouse. But if you come to that conversation and you're blaming and you're pointing fingers and it's all about what they did to you and there's no accountability on what your contribution to the relationship is at that point, or maybe because you triggered them and they responded in a way, you just both got to own your stuff and then say, how can we both be better together? And where do we maybe need to compromise on some of this? Those are the things when you have these conversations that really matter. And so, okay, so let's recap a little bit. We talked about what is emotional intimacy. We talked about how you can improve or elevate it. And then point 3 was, what are some of the red flags that you need to look out for so that you don't push your partner away? And I think one of the biggest red flags that you need to watch out for in your relationship is, and ask yourself this question: do I focus on the differences between my partner and I in a negative light? Or do I embrace the differences as something that make us stronger? Like Stephanie talked about, we are different in a lot of ways. But over 24 years of marriage, we have actually grown more into one person. I have helped her improve on her opportunity areas, some of her weaknesses that she had when we first got together, like being more assertive and aggressive and being able to run through that fear. And she has helped me so much, alternatively, with having patience and grace and learning when to just understand somebody's acting out of character and not lash out and lash back and be overly aggressive like how I used to be. So the two of us together, not only have we come closer as one, but we've made each other stronger individually over the years, because most of the time we embrace the differences between each other. If you're watching on YouTube, Steph's not crying. That wasn't that much of an emotional moment for her, but she has something in her eye. Should have just said you were crying right now.
Something in my eye.
So again, don't focus on the difference. Celebrate the difference and know that that difference is something that will bring you guys together and make both of you stronger if you choose to see it in that way.
I think it's really cool. Like in the beginning of our relationship, we tend to gravitate towards each other because of our differences. Like we see it, we're attracted to them because they have those things that we don't have. And so we're like, oh, I like that they have this. They, it creates this balance for you where you're like, ooh, they're going to give me that thing I don't have. Because I tell Walt all the time, one of the things that drew me to him was his confidence, because I lacked that. So I've just loved that he always came across so confident and full of life, and I wanted more of that. And it's like he said, but then as time goes on and you're in the relationship, sometimes those things have the opposite effect and they start to drive you crazy
For real.
because they're so different from you. And then you start to, zero in on, we talked about the magnifying glass, and we zero in on those things, because it's ironic that, he always points out that he loves my patience, and that was something he didn't have, and that, he drew him to me. Well, but then he hates waiting on me because I take a long time to get ready, and so he has to wait for me. So I'm constantly testing his patience.
Yeah. She's making sure that I learn patience, I guess, along the way by making me wait. That's the only thing I can think of after all these years.
I always say
It's worked somewhat.
that's why God put me in your life, because he's teaching you patience.
Teach me not to have to respond with urgency to everything in my life. It's okay to slow down sometimes.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Walt is always, he does have a very strong sense of urgency. So he's like, kind of feels like to me, always in a rush. So I'm constantly trying to slow him down and say, take in this moment and like make him appreciate some things a little more, because he's just on to the next thing, always on to the next thing. And it's a lot of what makes him very successful, because he does have that ability to do that. But I feel like then he misses some of the good stuff in life because he's too in a rush and too in a hurry and not slowing down and appreciating some of the things around him. So there's those, those nuances. But see, that's where we say like the differences, we tend to focus in on the differences as a negative and let it get us upset, and we start turning away from our partner because that thing is annoying us and upsetting us, and we feel like we can't get it through to them that that's what it is. And instead of, you know, taking that different approach and being like, you know what, I need to stop looking at it that way. Really they're helping me do this or whatever it is.
It's going to make me a better person in the long run, even though right now it might be a little frustrating. and and that's okay, guys. Like living with somebody, sharing your life with somebody, being emotionally and physically involved with those things, it's not easy to make half of who you are as a human being somebody else. And there's a lot of compromise that goes along with that too. And I think one of the things I wanted to mention here was don't always make this about you. Don't always make it about what your spouse is doing for you. Start to become a student of your spouse. And I think I've done more of this as I've gotten a little older. You go through the first puppy love stage with your partner, and you're asking each other questions. And what's your favorite candy bar? And what's your favorite movie? And what's your favorite this? And what's your favorite that? And then you do all these amazing things for them as you're courting them. And then you move in together, and life starts getting hard, and you become lazy. It's not that you lose interest for who your spouse is. You just want to talk about you, if you're an extrovert, especially, instead of asking questions. So become a student of your spouse. Become a student who really wants to get to know them on a very deep and intimate level and helps them feel seen and heard in a way that they won't ever feel if you always make it about yourself. That will transform your relationship. And frankly, because I'm an extrovert, I actually have to be really intentional about this because I'll just talk about myself all day. And Steph's wonderful. She'll just listen and, oh, babe, you're so amazing and it's incredible. And, ooh, I love when you do that. And then I realized, should I just talk for 2 hours? I didn't even ask her how her day was. So there's a balance there, and you need to become a student of your spouse if you really want to have the deepest connection possible.
Yeah, it's funny that you said that because at the beginning we talked about that question we asked about fully knowing your spouse or being fully known.
Mm-hmm.
And Walt had said, didn't you say fully know?
Yeah.
He feels like he struggles to
I said,
fully know me
I feel like I struggle to fully know you
because
because
of that reason.
I don't always take the time to ask deeper level questions. And by the way, a lot of guys are like this too, ladies. So don't take it personal. Guys will ask some questions and then they're cool. They don't need to know anymore.
Right.
And ladies, you guys have a superpower of being able to dig and keep asking the next level questions because you're craving that emotional intimacy in a way that a guy craves it differently. And the way we get to emotional intimacy looks different. And that's cool. And it's just finding the balance in between. And guys, for us, it's making sure that we're intentional about meeting our wife's emotional intimacy needs too and stretching ourselves past the boundaries that feel comfortable.
Right. So like he said, he didn't ask a lot about me, as much about me. So he felt like he wouldn't fully get to know me because he wouldn't ask me about, like, be curious about your spouse. And like he said, I think I'm more naturally curious and I like to know about people. So I am always asking questions and I do want to dig deeper and find out more about someone. And it's true. I think men and women overall tend to be different about this. And this is why women, I said, like we said, the women are going to have a stronger emotional intimacy because we do dig and want to know and care. And not that men don't, but they just don't seem to have the same interest in that.
I think we do it in just a different way. And so what I want you to do and what we did in the workshop that we were facilitating this last week and the way we ended the entire workshop, which was pretty neat, is we asked everybody to say, what's the one thing that's different about you and your spouse that you actually love the most about them? And the answers that everybody gave just filled that room with love and joy, and everybody felt special and seen and heard and walked away with a huge smile on their face. Go tell your spouse what you love the most about them that's different in who you are and how it makes you a better person. And just watch their reaction. You probably will see a reaction that you've never seen before if you've never approached that question from this way. And so I challenge you big time, guys, to go do that this week.
Yeah, because I feel like we focus on the resentments most of the time. We get focused on that one thing that annoys us and is driving us crazy, and it builds that resentment. And we're focused on that when we come to do something like this, when we go to a marriage workshop or we're doing something to work on the marriage, we're thinking about that thing that's bothering us. And we kind of flipped that totally around and said, instead, what is it you love about your spouse? What is it that they bring to you that, made you fall in love with them? And changes your whole focus. And when you start thinking about it, you're like, "Man, yeah, I forgot about all those great things that they do."
They are pretty awesome. Wow. Okay, guys. So look, we're going to get ready to wrap up, but we talked about what is emotional intimacy and gave you guys some examples of those. We talked about how to improve or elevate your emotional intimacy. And we talked about making sure that you focus on the positive attributes of your partner instead of pushing them away by focusing on the negative attributes and those red flags that we all kind of have in our relationship sometimes. And I know Steph had written down a lie and a truth to help us kind of wrap this full circle. And so, Steph, why don't you talk to him about that? That was pretty good.
So in conclusion, I wanted to share with you guys what I feel like is a lie that comes out of emotional intimacy. And that is that emotional intimacy will naturally improve over time. That is a lie. It will not naturally improve. If you don't put ongoing effort and intention behind working on this all the time in your relationship, you will find yourself married to a stranger. That's what happens when you don't put intentionality behind this emotional intimacy, building that with your spouse, being honest and vulnerable with them. If you don't share your feelings and you don't open up about those things deep inside that really bother you and let them in, then you won't fully know them. And it's not going to just naturally improve. It takes a lot of effort. It takes having a lot of these deep conversations and really communicating on another level with your spouse. And we know we're always talking about communication. We're always saying like this is the most important, and it truly is. Because if you don't find, I'm not even going to say find, I'm going to say make the time to have these conversations with your spouse, you're going to be with a stranger. So,
boom. Drop the mic. Let's go. Steph dropping gold on you guys today. I hope you realize that. That was really good, baby. Nice job. So look, guys, we're done for today. I can't wait to get into next week, talk about part 2, and that's that physical intimacy. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, come back for that. Don't forget in the meantime to join our Facebook group at Legacy Driven Marriages and share this episode with somebody that you know needs it. If you have any questions or topics that you'd like for us to bring up and talk about, kick those over to us. We're getting more and more from our listeners.
yeah.
And it's so cool because now we know we're answering questions that you guys directly want to hear.
We really want your feedback. I'm just going to throw this out there because Walt and I are starting to talk to each other like, we don't know if we're being too serious on this. Are we do you feel like we're reprimanding you? Like, we want to know this kind of stuff. Like, is this actually resonating with you? Is it helpful? Is there a way that we could be more helpful? Please share that kind of stuff with us. We really need to know so we can show it better for you guys.
That's awesome. So look, guys, until the next time,
get into the arena of your marriage, keep fighting for your relationship, and keep elevating your generational legacy. And we'll see you guys next Tuesday.
See you guys.